So that's the subject of my talk. And let me say before beginning that the slides, as usual, I post my presentation with the speaking text online. So don't worry about trying to capture all of the detail that you can see. If anybody wants to follow up, then it'll appear on academia.edu at some point. This continues work I started during lockdown on the vocabulary of nautical technology, a couple of papers so far, both of them which need correcting, by the way, and then I extended it to marine fauna, including fish. And today I'm just going to focus on fish. Why lockdown? Because it's one subject that I could study at home because I actually had a lot of the lexical resources with me. And also I've got my own Zanzibari consultant at home, consultant in inverted commas, who sometimes agrees to answer questions. So that's what this is. So Swahili and Comorian have hundreds, and I do mean hundreds of names for fish and other marine creatures. And where did all these names come from? The northeast coastal Bantu ancestors of Swahili were originally only familiar with inland waters and fisheries, as they sort of swept up historically in that direction. So how did they acquire the knowledge they needed to exploit the marine resources that they encountered on the coast? So we're going way back in time, 1,500, 2,000 years ago. So where did they get that knowledge? And what do their names for marine species tell us about that process of adaptation? So a group of mixed farmers arrive on the coast. This is obviously a simplification, but arrive on the coast. They've not encountered marine species. And now we find that there are hundreds of names for them. Where did they all come from? And the following is just a preliminary sketch. And I won't really go into Comorian in this talk because it introduces a whole set of complications, some of them that I've not worked out for myself yet. The classificatory position of Swahili and approximate dates are shown on the slide on the right there. And note the distance between Swahili and Comorian. Comorian is not a Swahili dialect. It's actually quite separate. And a lot of its fish names are quite different. There's some overlap because some of them can be traced back to Proto-Sabaki. Others have been borrowed backwards and forwards between the two languages, but there are also some that have evolved quite separately. And this slide is just a reminder. It shows you the primary dialects of Swahili and their classification, so primary being those original coastal dialects. And to reconstruct fish names to Proto or early Sabaki, they have to be found at least as cognates in both northern and southern branches of Swahili, of Swahili dialects, as well as in Comorian. It's not perfect, but there are no other languages in that group that that sort of you know, have an extensive fishing vocabulary. Maybe some of the Mijikenda, but I don't think it's particularly separate from Swahili. And here are some examples of general fishing vocabulary, sort of generic terms, with old Bantu roots, including the generic terms for fish, that's that dialect Swi, or the Arabic-derived Samaki, and eels, Mkunga, plural Mikunga in standard Swahili. Those are very old terms, and obviously because you get, you know, fish are fish, and that's the same in freshwater marine, and also eels, you find them in both environments. And the only fish names that were carried over from freshwater to marine species were those for groups of fish that are recognizably the same across both environments, such as eels and another group, catfish. You find in fact, some species of catfish are found both in freshwater estuarine environments as well as in the sea. And these include eel, the so-called eel catfish. And just to give an example, that Mvita dialect names for eel catfish are both inherited Bantu terms. So Tondi and Ngogo, they have a longer history. That said, so I get my pages right. That said, whilst Swahili has actually few inherited fish names, relatively few, there aren't many more than that. There might be a few more that I've not picked up yet, but a larger number have been taken from other languages. And it's possible that some of the names that can't now be explained were borrowed from the languages of earlier coastal fisherfolk. So whoever it was who preceded the incoming Swahili and Comorians on the coast. We don't actually know much about who they were or what languages they spoke. So it's difficult to prove in the absence of comparative vocabularies. It's no good looking at the vocabulary of Sandawe or Hadza, for example, in the interior of Tanzania, because they don't have vocabularies for marine species. They're just, they're too far away. And so it's difficult to know what might have come from a non-Bantu African language in this region, except perhaps Somali. There is a set of Somali fish names. So the possibilities of comparison with Somali. And there are one or two examples that I've come across so far of fish names that might be related to the Cushitic names used in Somali. And there seems to be little evidence of old loanwords from Persian or Arabic. For those who know this linguistic history, there's this old layer of Persian and Arabic. It's not always clear which is which or to know the difference. But there's very few of those loanwords from Persian, Arabic, or even South Asian languages. I haven't hardly been able to find any. Chaffee, a fish some of them will know, it's a rabbit fish. Tassie to others, Chaffee, Tassie in the north, is one candidate. So if you look at the Arabic, I'm not sure I know how to pronounce this, but Safi and the Persian, also Somali, possibly, there looks as though there's some relationship there. I can't prove it, but it's possible that that's an old inherited term. Old because it has the Bantu prefix, the 910 class prefix. The reconstructed form is Nchaf. And there are also relatively few names for which an Austronesian and specifically Malagasy source can be proposed. Very few. I've looked, but I can only find a small number. Such as those at the top, and some of those are only possibles. And here's one of them, a local name for the emperor red snapper. So in the sort of Mrima dialect area, Tanga and thereabouts, this word Dumbwara, sometimes it's also been recorded as Dimbwara. You can make a case for it being descended, if you like, from this old Malagasy term, also in Old Javanese. Originally Old Javanese, Lembwara or Lambwara. And as it's coming to Swahili, the la bit at the beginning, or the la bit in that, has been reinterpreted as though it were an old Swahili prefix, either Lumbwara or Li, the class 5 prefix, Limbwara. And that's how you would generate Dumbwara and Dimbwara. That's a proposal. It's not proven, but it looks quite strong. And in the process, the name of the meaning of this word has changed as it's moved into Malagasy, where it now refers to dugongs, to those marine mammals. But in the Swahili dialect, it still refers to this big fish, the emperor red snapper, which can be quite big in size. And the largest and most easily recognizable set of loanwords is from Arabic. And these are all relatively recent borrowings, including fish that were imported in dried form, or originally imported rather than fished. And they're also predominantly the names of large oceanic species, reflecting the expertise of the Arabic-speaking crews from whom Swahili learned much of their knowledge of deep sea sailing and fishing. And that's where you get all this later vocabulary for different types of boats that obviously come from the Gulf and thereabouts. But what about all the rest of Swahili names for fish? And it seems that many, and perhaps most of them, were lexical and semantic innovations. Names that Swahili speakers and their immediate ancestors coined themselves, using their own lexical resources to describe their fish they caught, and in most cases, ate. The original meaning of many names has been forgotten. In some cases, it can only be guessed at, while other names are evidently more recent innovations. So it's a process that you find happening up until recent times, but also with a lot of these older names that you can reconstruct to the pre-Swahili stage of linguistic development. You can see some of them, because some of them are shared with Comorian as well. And there's some examples in that table. I won't go through them, but these are all names which you can hypothesize that they're derived from the language itself, or whatever that language was, Proto-Sabaki, Swahili, Proto-Swahili, and so on. And one category of these innovative names is especially interesting. Names like Pungu on the last slide, Pungu, if you remember, is an eagle, it's also an eagle ray, which have been taken from other animals. There's a whole class of these words that have been adapted or just taken straight from the names of other animals. And here's some obvious ones: Nungu, Panzi, Sangi, Tembo in some Swahili, Kipepeo. And as the second column here shows, the English names, this suggests it's also been a productive process in English. A lot of our, we call the fish lizard fishes that also some Swahili call garomwe, which is a local name for, particularly on the Kenya coast, for lizard fishes. And it's derived from the name for a particular kind of lizard. And to me, the most remarkable example of this that I've come across so far is the adoption of the names of male and female bushbuck, shown at the top, for snappers, according to their colour resemblance to one or the other sex. So male bushbuck are darker in colour than female bushbuck. The names for them, which you can trace back to Proto-Sabaki, in fact, go much earlier, they're all Bantu names, those. But basically, the names for the name that's used for a male bushbuck has become, in many Swahili dialects, the name for the darker coloured snappers. Whereas the lighter coloured snappers are called by the name that was applied to the females. So that kind of gendered description of bushbuck has kind of come down in Swahili in a different form as a term for different colour variants, which I found fascinating. I mean, the standard forms of these names are Kungu and Mboa and Mboala. Again, as I say, they're all Bantu, Eastern Bantu names. And this happens, these names have been carried, I think, as loanwords onto islands. Well, I guess it includes Zanzibar as well, but onto islands, the Comoros, Madagascar, where there are no bushbuck. There's no bushbuck. Nobody would know that connection anymore. These are words that originated on the mainland. There are no bushbucks present on the islands off the East African coast. Now, in the time remaining, I can only show a small sample of the names I've been looking at. Here's Chewa. For Kenyans, you'll know that as the Tewa of Shibola Tewa, famous location, location of a prison as well. Lightly named, and it's lightly named, I think the name for their habit of staying put, literally floating, rather than swimming away when discovered. This is one reason why they're actually quite easy to spear. They're really big fish. These are the rock cod, the groupers, but they tend not to swim away like other fish. They sort of just lurk in their holes, and they are actually quite easy for modern fishers as well to kill when they come across them. Here's Changu, a name which many of you will be familiar with, probably derived from a verb describing its social or swimming behavior. Down there, it's the descendants of this inherited of the verb kuchanga, what was originally kuchanga, to collect or wander around, in another set of meanings. And here's chazo, the suckerfish that was once kept in order to catch turtles. I don't know if any of you are familiar with this history of using fish to kind of capture turtles, but there's some really nice descriptions of the remoras being kept in cages by fishermen and then used, because they attach themselves to other fish. They do the same to whales and porpoises and all sorts as well, but they can be trained. Trained is a loose use of the word, but they can be used to haul in, attach themselves to turtles, and then you haul them in. And that's possibly an early loan word. I'm not sure, but there's some similarity with that Arabic word, which ultimately derives from the verb meaning to attach. I'm not sure, but I don't otherwise know where that name comes from. And bunju, one of my favorite names, bunju, puffer fishes, and they're named, I think, for their poison. And those of you worked in Zanzibar or know Zanzibar will know this word punju. It's the most notorious poison of the witches, a punju. It's a typical sort of witch's brew of lizards and amphibians. It's been much feared and really nasty. Also appears in the name of the Zanzibar red colobus, which is known as kima punju, because other animals, dogs and so on, don't like its flesh, so it's said. And to give an example of a marine animal that is not a fish, and I could do many more of these, including shellfish, it's not a fish zoologically speaking, pueza, named after the time and place they're usually speared by, these days, women, perhaps always women, but derived from this verb kupwa, about the ebbing, describing the ebbing of the tide. And this is, classically when you encounter octopuses. And let me close by reiterating that there are histories of adaptation and innovation in these names that can be matched with evidence from other sources. And I don't have time, haven't had time to sort of start looking at that in detail, but this is what I'm working on now. And in particular, zooarchaeological findings of archaeologists about the changing prevalence of different marine vertebrates in fish middens. So archaeologists, the classic site of Shanga in the north, in the Lamu archipelago, there's a very nice sequence and description of which types of fish over the centuries were the most popular, or the ones that you can find most. And you can match this kind of linguistic data to see, how far back can a name be reconstructed? Does that match the archaeological evidence? We need more archaeological evidence, but it's a possibility that you can do that kind of matching. And last but not least, thank you very much. Shukran.